Hello, everyone, and welcome to the EarthtonesGirl podcast. My name is Denise, and I am your host for today. This is a special episode dedicated exclusively to sock knitting. This is part one of 3 episodes. I'm hoping to keep it into 3 episodes for you, and we are going to talk socks. I have wanted to do this episode for a really long time. My last regular podcast episode was 3 weeks ago, actually Saturday, and so much I've been so busy. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I've had some oral surgery done. I am definitely on the mend now, but talking was a little bit difficult for a little while, so that was a delay, and my kids are now on Easter break, and it was prepping for Easter break, and there's been so much. I am not going to bore you with all of the details, but the point is I am here now, and let's just jump right into it. So I also tried for the last few weeks to figure out how to do this, how to present all of this information to you in as clean and concise a manner as I possibly could. I thought about just putting it all together in one big episode, and then I thought I could timestamp that, and then you could figure out and find the pieces that you wanted to focus on. And then I thought, you know what, the episode's just going to be too big. So I thought doing it this way would be a little bit better, and it would also stop more delays. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I feel like there's always an obstacle to getting this episode done. Even right now, it is Monday. It is the day after Easter, so a belated happy Easter to everyone. My kids are on Easter break. Slash spring break, and it's a little later in the afternoon. It is about 2 o'clock, and it's a little gray outside, so that means my light is not that great. But again, it's all of these silly little obstacles that keep getting into my way with recording this, and I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. It's okay. It's okay. I am not a professional vlogger, podcaster, so I am going to do my best, and I think it's more the content that's important here as opposed to, and still being able to see, of course, and I think that you can, but yes, I just want to get this information out to you without any more delays. So that said, I feel like I'm also a little bit rusty because I haven't been here in a little while, but so let's just talk about how I'm going to do this. I have my notes right here. Like I said, this episode is called Sock Talk. I don't think I've said that, but I'm naming these 3 episodes Sock Talk Part 1, 2, and 3. And in each episode, I am going to talk about one particular type of heel and then give you lots of other pieces of information, tips, tricks, other things to focus on regarding sock knitting as we go through. So part 1 is going to be we're going to focus today on the heel flap and gusset style heel. In the other day I put up a Q&A on Instagram to try to figure out what was the biggest problem that people had, and the biggest problem were heels. There were a lot of other little things that people were curious about, like second sock syndrome and stuff like that, but the main problem that people have, the main issue, is avoiding holes in their socks, in their heels, understanding how the heels work. And there's three main, yes, I'm just looking at this. There are 3 main types of socks that people tend to use. There's the heel flap and gusset, and I'm going to show you samples of all of those. There's the heel flap and gusset, there's an afterthought heel, and then there's a short row heel. And under the short row heel category, there are many variations on that, and we'll talk about those in another episode. So each category of heel is going to get its own episode. This one, like I said, we're going to focus today on the heel flap and gusset, and which I've also called a drop heel, but we've talked about that before. But anyway, heel flap and gusset, that is our focus for today, and how to avoid holes when you are working that. And I've got a little sock here. I'm going to demo the technique for picking up the stitches and avoiding the holes on a small sock. I do have bigger socks here to show you, but so let me continue. This is basically, I'm breaking this up into 6 categories. So the first category is going to be measuring your foot. How do you measure your foot? Whether you're knitting toe up, top down, DPNs, it doesn't really matter. Oh, excuse me. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I may edit that out. How do you measure your foot to get a properly fitting sock? That was another really big concern. Another category we're going to discuss is row gauge versus stitch gauge. We have counting your rows versus just measuring your sock so that you know when and where to put your heel in. How to custom fit a sock based on an existing pattern, and how to customize your sock if you're dealing with a commercial pattern. So there's a difference between customizing it to make it fit your foot, how to take a plain pattern and make that fit your foot, or just a generic vanilla pattern. And then if you have an existing sock and your foot may be too big or too small for the sock, you'd like to add a little bit more stitches, you'd like to embellish the pattern a little bit, we're going to talk about that too. And then, of course, the main topic for this episode is how to avoid the holes when you're picking up the stitches for the drop, for the heel flap and gusset at that intersection. So all of this information that I'm going to be talking about today, you can find in the links that I have set up in my Ravelry group for the No Fear Sock Cal. And I know many of you watching today are participating in that. And again, thank you so much for participating. It has grown so huge. I never thought it would get this huge, and it has, and I'm so excited and proud of it. And many people are helping. It's really gotten big, and many people within the group are helping each other, and I am helping as well. The last couple of weeks I have not been on as frequently as I would have liked, again, just because of life. There. So everything I'm saying here in this episode, there are links, video tutorials, there are book links, video links, pattern links to everything I'm going to talk about here today. I think the only thing I haven't linked to is the customizing. But then again, there is information about all of that within other patterns. And another reason I'm doing these videos right now is because I do understand how daunting it is for people to take all of these links and all of these information. It is in categories, not alphabetical, but you just look up what type of sock, whether you're knitting toe up, top down, everything is right there. You just have to read through it to find what you are looking for. But I understand how daunting that can be for some people to sort through all of the information. So I'm going to try to make it as concise and clear here in this video as I can for you. So let's just take a look for a moment at a heel flap and gusset sock. So here it is here. I'm going to grab a blocker from right here and put this on for you. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're knitting a pattern sock or a plain sock. The heel flap and gusset is basically the same, unless there's something specific that the pattern tells you to do on the heel. But right now we're just discussing a basic heel flap and gusset. So here it is. This is the Monkey Socks by Cookie A. This is a very old, very well-loved pattern. And there's something about knitting a textured sock that it just flies off the needles. It's really amazing. You know what, I'm gonna go here because I think you can see a little bit better. So the basic construction is, this is the heel flap. You're going to work on your leg, whatever pattern that is, plain or textured, etc. This is the heel flap in here. The heel flap is usually as long as it is wide. So you want that heel flap to be a square. Is that an absolute? No, it is not. You can, here's a customizing point. You can make that if you know that your foot, excuse me, the heel of your foot is a little bit longer, it's okay to make this heel flap a little longer. Patterns are not absolutes. They are treat it almost as a recipe. There are times when if you're dealing with something as specific as this, you do have to follow it pretty much to the letter. And there are variations even on this pattern. But a basic sock pattern is sort of a recipe. So you can tweak it here and there, just as you would a regular recipe. You add more salt, you add more pepper, you might add butter where there is no butter in the original pattern to make it fit and do what you want it to do. Make the recipe taste the way you want it to and make your sock fit the way you need it to. So what you're going, yeah, I keep going back here with the light. So usually, again, I'll say it again, the heel flap here is usually as long as it is wide. So if you are working this particular, you know what? So there you go. I'm going to continue with that thought in another sock for a moment. And then you have the turn here, right in here. So you're working back and forth on these stitches. So you're knitting a row, purling a row, knitting a row, purling a row. When you get here is the turn. So it's the heel flap and turn, heel turn. The turn is in here. The gusset is this in here. Here is the gusset. So the gusset is when you're now joining this back portion of the heel back onto the main portion of the sock. And you're whittling away, knitting away these stitches, decreasing these stitches. And those decreases happen right along here until you're back down to your original number of stitches. Okay? Where people usually get the hole is right here. They usually get a hole right in here. Turn this around just so you can see. Now this is within, as you can see, this is also a textured pattern that has holes, but this is where you would get the hole. Okay, and that is what's so frustrating for people. So I'm going to pop this off. I'm going to put on another textured sock for you to see. And I'm trying to remember, I probably should have written it down, what the name of this particular pattern is, because I know I'm going to get that. I will try to add it in the show notes. This is really tall. Here is another textured sock. This originally had lace in it, but I just eliminated the lace. There you go. If you decide you don't want lace in your sock, or you want to eliminate the cable, you can just knit the stitches. And again, I'll go into that a little bit more later. So here again, we've done the heel flap, here's the heel turn, and here are the gusset stitches in here. Now, when in this particular pattern, you are working the gusset stitches within the ribbed pattern. Is that complicated? Absolutely not. It's just something you have to pay a little bit more attention to. But the idea is still the same. The principle is still the same. So now let's look at a plain sock, because I do have one here. Here we go. Let's pop this one on. Okay. This is probably, of course I had to pick a darker one, but again, you can still see the basic gist of what I'm saying. Again, here's the space. There is no hole there, and there is no hole. You have your heel flap, you have the turn, and it's picking up stitches in this gusset area in here. You are still, now when you don't have to worry about a pattern, you just are going to knit back down to your original, let's say this pattern is 64 stitches, and then you're just going to keep going until you get down to the toe. It's not that difficult, and what I think is the trickiest part for many people is being able to read their stitches. That's the biggest problem. People can't read their stitches, and that's when the problem comes in. So let's look at this one here for a second. Again, heel flap, turn, here's the gusset. I'm decreasing in this section right here. Again, there is no hole, and picking these stitches up, it's basically closing the hole in one spot, just one spot on either side. And once you know how to do that, the hole should absolutely be eliminated. So I'm going to pause for just one moment. I'm going to collect my thoughts, and then we're going to go on to specifics with measuring your foot. So I'll be right back, guys. Hello everybody, I am back. I decided that I am not going to worry about aesthetics for this video. It is dark and we need light, so I have turned on an overhead light. I think that is going to help us dramatically with being able to see. I cannot rely exclusively on the natural light for today. So let's continue. Let's talk about measuring your foot. Now, whether you are knitting toe up or top down, I recommend two things. Making a model of your foot. This I made many, many years ago during a workshop that I did with Kat Bordhi. Kat Bordhi is an amazing designer. She is she is a knitwear designer, but she specifically does I think personally her specialty is socks. She has an extremely unique way of thinking about sock knitting, designing socks, and if you ever get a chance to take a look at any of her books, New Pathways, of course, I thought I had the book here. You know what, I'll grab it in just a minute. Very, very unique way of, again, approaching sock knitting. And during the workshop, this is what we did. This is the model that we did of our feet. You can find instructions for this in the Fish Lips Kiss Heel pattern. I am going to go, and on this pattern, you guys, I can't stress enough how hugely valuable this pattern is. Patty, who is the designer, socks therapist, but her real name is Patty, is absolutely amazing and thorough. This pattern is 16 pages. It's really an ebook of instructions for measuring your foot. She goes into that here in the pattern, how to mark things off on your model. I'm totally blanking on what I really want to call this, but she goes into a lot of detail with where to mark things off on your template. Let's use that word. That's the word I want to use. So I do recommend taking the time, try to get past the fact that it is a little bit daunting, but I promise you, by the time you get through each section of the ebook, you will be able to customize your socks, get the perfect fit. It really is amazing. So this is a model of my foot. My foot in a shoe is 7.5. That's my shoe size, 7.5. When I measured this, when I did this model, and what I did, I stood up against a wall. You don't have to, but I stood up against a wall, and the only piece of cardboard I could find was a cereal box, and it just happened to be Corn Pops that day. So I cut that out because I just needed a really thin, flexible piece of cardboard, and all of the participants in the class took turns helping to measure each other's feet. Can you do this on your own? Yes, you absolutely can. What you want to do is stand either against the wall or just freestanding. You want to put your feet together, okay? So your feet will be together, and you just want to go around the border of your foot with a pencil. There you go. That's it. This is what I did here. There are certain lines, which is why it's helpful to have somebody help measure you. There are certain lines that you are going to need someone to help you draw. It can feel a little distorted or get a little distorted if you are bending over and doing it yourself, but the distortion is not going to be so dramatic that it so greatly alters your sock. So if you are alone and can't find anyone to measure your feet, just go ahead. You can do this on your own. And then you are going to add all of these lines. And what these lines are, it's where the ball of your foot is. It is the ball of your foot, cardboard cutout, right? That's what I wanted to say. You also have where the arch of your foot starts, where your heel starts, and where your ankle bone is on the sock. Where your ankle bone is in relation to when you're standing, your ankle, here, let's do it this way. So my ankle, when I stood here, lined up perfectly with this line, okay? So again, I can't repeat everything that's in this pattern because it is copyrighted, it is a paid-for pattern. I do recommend, please take the time to go in and look it up. But what I did, once you have these lines on your sock, on your template, you will know exactly when to start heels for afterthought heels, how long your sock has to be before you start the heel. And again, top down, toe up, heel flap and gusset, it doesn't matter. You will then know exactly when you need to start your foot. There's my son at the door. Give Mama a couple minutes, buddy. I apologize in advance. There will be interruptions. I would have to wait a whole other week to do this, so I'm just going to keep going. So this is the line to know when to start your heel. Okay, and that is really, really important. That's a very critical line for you to get. I think it's honestly the most important line on here. So, like I was saying before, my shoe size is 7.5. This measures 9.5. Very interesting. This is actually, and this is based on a ruler. If you put this against a ruler, and I do happen to have a sock ruler here, this is 9.5. Okay, from where the toe is, if you can see that, from where the toe is to where the top is, actually going this way, it measures 9.5 on here. So you can get yourself a ruler like this and use this just to measure your feet. You can measure the feet of people that you frequently knit socks for. If you do get the chance, if you know that you're knitting a lot of socks for your husband, for your partner, for your children, you know, every time the kids, especially with children, their feet change so many times, it's a piece of cardboard. You can do these multiple times, and it might actually be kind of nice if you save them. You can laminate them and just have a progression of their feet growing as they grow. So that could be a little keepsake for you, but you can just make these really easy for your children, for the people that you knit for. But this is going to be your guide for your socks. So that is basically, that is how you're going to measure. You're going to use the template. If you've been knitting socks for a very long time, oh, I just realized why it's so dark outside, because it's now raining. If you've been knitting socks for a very long time, after a while you may not need this template because you know when to stop. You know exactly how many rows or rounds to knit on your sock, which actually takes me to counting versus, I'm following this kind of loosely, but it actually takes me to counting your rows versus measuring. Now I'm telling you to use these two to measure, okay? These two things to measure your sock, measure your foot so that you know at what point to stop, to start your heel. You also have the option, if you've got a sock that fits really well, you've knit a sock, you've knit the first sock, what you can also do for yourself is count your rows. Or your rounds rather. Count your rounds. How many rounds have you knit? If you're starting from the toe, after your toe decreases, how many rounds have you knit until you're ready to start your heel? If you're starting from the top down, once you get past the leg of your sock, you'll then know and again, working top down is a little bit different because you can put the heel in when you're ready at any point. But you still need to then know how deep and how long you need this heel flap and heel turn and the gusset is to get the right fit. And that goes into, you know what, before I talk about counting versus measuring, let me talk about gauge. Because some people had questions too about knitting. Sorry, I feel so scattered with this episode. So I do apologize for that. I hope that you can all keep up with what I'm doing here. So you have a row gauge and a stitch gauge. The row gauge on a sock is not as important. That is how many rows or rounds you're getting to the inch. That is important when you're doing a colorwork sock because you need the motif. If the motif has a certain number of rounds in it to complete the motif, to complete the pattern, and that is 1.5 inches and you only have 1 inch left before your sock, you have to start your heel, then you have to figure that out. And by that, what you can do is you can do half of a motif and continue it after you've done your, and this is basically to continue it on the top of your sock. So if you're doing a colorwork sock and you get to, okay, right here, you know you need to start your heel, what you can do is then split the motif in half, work your heel, and then continue on the motif down the top of the foot. But in general, the row or the row gauge, or how many stitches you're getting, how many rounds you're getting, or how many rows you're getting per inch is not as important as your stitch gauge. That's the key. Your stitch gauge is how many stitches you get per inch. When you are measuring your foot, let me find a tape measure. You know what? I'm going to pause for another moment and I'm going to go and grab, you know what? Can I grab? Don't go anywhere. I'm going off camera for just 1 second. Hang on. Okay, here I am. Okay, I am back. So what you want to do, you have your tape measure, standard issue tape measure, and what you're going to do, I'm going to pull my foot up as high as I possibly can. Here's my foot, you guys. What you want to do is actually measure across the ball of your foot. So let's just pretend, this is my foot. The ball of your foot is here. I'm going to hold my foot up. Here's the ball of your foot, right across here, okay? This is the part right across this wide point in your foot. This is where you want to measure. So on my foot, let's see, mine is 8 inches around exactly. So if I know the ball of my foot is 8 inches around and my gauge is 8 stitches to the inch, 8 times 8, you multiply the number of inches by the number of stitches, it's 64 stitches that I can cast on. Now, if you want a little bit of negative ease for that, because your sock should have negative ease, and negative ease is you want the sock to fit a little bit, to knit up a little smaller so that it does hug your foot a little bit more. Okay, the ease is how much, literally the way it sounds, how much ease, how much room space you have within the garment that you're knitting. In a sweater, for example, you want to have, let's say you might want to have 2 or 3 inches or 2, 4, 6, 8 inches of negative ease because you want a balanced amount. For a sock, you don't necessarily have to worry about it being even on side to side. You need it to be even. You need that ease to be all the way around the sock. So you want to deduct about an inch. So if mine is 8 inches around, I'm going to deduct an inch. So that would be 7 times 8, which is 56. If I really want my stitches, want my sock to be really snug. Now, I tend to knit at a gauge of 9 stitches to the inch. So I don't have to worry so much. I can still do an 8 times 9. I'm going to then do 60. I'm still going to do my 64 stitches because I know I've taken away that extra inch for my ease, for my negative ease within my sock. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And anything that I'm saying here, you guys, please leave, if you have any questions about anything I'm saying, please leave it in the comments down below. And I'm going to try very hard to link to any references that I make in this video. I will link to all of that information down below for you. So yes, it is your stitch gauge that is more important than your row gauge. Now, someone did have a question about that. Should they change needle size? Excuse me again, should they change their needle size then, or change the needle size or cast on less stitches? It really does, aesthetics does come into this a little bit because you can go down a needle size. I tend to knit my socks on a 2.25 needle, 2.25 millimeter needle. The next needle size below that is 2.0, which is a US 0. There is no number equivalent for 2.25. But a 2.0 is a 2.0 millimeter needle is a size US 0. That is really tiny, you guys. And some people, I know that starts to hurt my hands a little bit if I go down that small. If you're a tight knitter, there's also the tendency possibly to even bend the needle a little bit because the thinner the needle, the more wiry it kind of becomes. So in that case, it may be a better solution to cast on less stitches. I know that Chelsea from Legacy Fiber Art, she casts on, I think she does 56 or 54 stitches sometimes for her socks, rather than going down a needle size. She may stick with a 2.25 or a 2.5. There's times if I'm doing a colorwork sock, I will go to a 2.5, which is a US 1. And I recently acquired a 2.75. Again, there's no number equivalent for that. But again, just to give me a little bit more wiggle room when I'm doing colorwork patterns, or if I'm doing something with a cable, or more of a texture sock. So that is the solution, I think, for that. Also, I also wanted to talk about sock yarn. Fingering weight yarn tends to come in 2 different weights. You've got 2 different weights. That's 2 different plies. Let me say that instead. So you've got applies blends, I think more blends. It's an 80-20 blend, which is 80% merino, 20% nylon. Then you can also get a 75-25 blend, which is 75% merino, 25% nylon. The higher the nylon content, in my experience, the thinner the sock yarn. Is that an absolute? No, but an 80-20 is going to be a plumper, springier yarn than a 75-25. A 75-25 is definitely a little bit thinner. That's more, for example, a Patton's Croy it feels more like an 80-20, but you might have a Regia or an Opal yarn that feels more like a 75-25. Those are more in commercial yarns. If you're talking about indie dyed yarn, I know that the Cozy Knitter, she tends to do, is this dyer here. Let's see if I can pull this down without taking everything down. And a lot of dyers have different bases, so you can pick a 75-25 or an 80-20, depends on your preference. And I will change my needle size accordingly. I know that to knit an 80-20, I need a high sharp 2.25. The point of the needle is also a factor. The pointier the needle, in my experience, the easier it is to split the yarn, to split the actual thread of yarn than if you're using, say, something with a slightly blunter point, which is an Addi sock rocket. So I will use an Addi sock rocket, which is slightly blunter on the plumper yarn, a blunter tip for the plumper yarn, a pointier tip for the thinner yarn. Does that make sense? Okay. Just a little tip that works for me. It's a little trick. It is very, very helpful for me. And it took me a little while to figure out why I was being annoyed all the time because I kept splitting my stitches when I was, for example, working on the 80-20. It was driving me nuts. And this, for anybody that's interested, isn't this just absolutely beautiful? This is, again, the Cozy Knitter on her Bliss base, which is the 80-20, and this particular colorway is Hopeless Romantic. So I just randomly pull that down to make a point. But it kept bothering me. Why am I splitting my stitches? Is it the yarn? It's gotta be the yarn. It's not the knitter. But in this case, it wasn't the yarn. It wasn't the knitter. It was the needle. So sock knitting is experimentation. You have to keep playing. There are a lot of variables in the mix, and you have to cut and paste and play. Keep notes, you guys. Keep a little notebook, a small little notebook. You could buy it anywhere if you want something pretty, if you want something simple. It doesn't matter. Keep a little notebook in your project bag, even a piece of paper that you can stick in a notebook later if you don't want to carry a big notebook around with you. It really does help to take notes in the very beginning. If you can keep it in your head, great. But keeping Ravelry project pages, keeping a notebook, keeping track of your knitting, what size needles you're using with what yarn really is a big help. It will save you so much time down the line. So now that we've talked about that, let's just go back to counting versus measuring for a moment. I have gotten to a point where, and I was taught early in my knitting career to count. Count, 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 count. Do not measure, do not measure, do not measure, do not measure. The philosophy behind that is if you are measuring, where's my tape measure? If you're measuring, or even, we'll do it two ways. If you're measuring with a tape measure, okay, and you hold this down on a surface, I'm going to hold this back up so you can see it. If you're holding this down on a surface, watch this. So I've got, this is measuring right now, right to where this starts. This is measuring 5.5. Okay, can you see that? So I've got the 0 right here at the top, and right where the heel starts is about 5.5. Now, watch what happens. This is just if I was laying this down. You may not do the same, you may not hold the sock the same way each time. You also have weather to factor in. And I know some of you are going, weather? Are you kidding me? There is a difference in your wool on a warm, humid day in the summer versus a cool, chilly day in the winter. There is a big difference. And if you've started your sock in the summer and you've put it down, you're working on another project, you finish the first sock, and you lay it down on a table and you measure to see how long your leg is, and it's 5.5, on the table. In the summer, you write that down. You pick up your sock now, it's the middle of winter, it's January, it's cold. You start knitting, you've got your numbers, you've got the right needle, you start knitting, and then you lay it down to measure to see when to start your heel. The yarn, the fabric is going to be a little tighter, okay? So watch, if I do this, now I'm at 5. It's different, guys. It's different. All of these things factor in. You also have people that like to stretch. So now let's do that. Let's stretch it out. So I'm here and I'm going to stretch this leg, because that's what happens when you put on a blocker. Now where am I? I'm up to 6. Holy crud. Now what? That's 3 different measurements based on 3 different factors. How you're measuring your sock, season, temperature, all of these things are factors. You're measuring, do you measure it just flat on a table? Do you measure it on the sock blocker? Do you measure it on your leg? All of these things can give you slightly different numbers. If you count, and you know that your leg is 80 rounds from cuff to when you're ready to start that heel. 80 rounds. It's 80 rounds. Okay, when you go to knit the next one, you knit it 80 rounds. Your legs will match. Again, they'll shrink evenly they'll shrink in the winter, or contract a little in the winter. They'll expand a little bit, plump up a little bit with humidity in the summer. But the point is, you still have 80 rounds, no matter what you do. So I am a diligent counter. I am working on a pair of socks toe up, and we'll talk about that when we get to afterthought heels, but I'm working on a pair toe up, and it's taking me a while because I'm sort of measuring and counting at the same time. That foot length has to get to 7.5, but I want to know, once I get to that number, when I slide the sock down over this ruler, I have to get down to 7.5, which is down here. Okay, when you see that, it's down to here. But I might want to go to 7.25 for stretch factor when I actually put the sock on. Let's say I go to 7.25. Okay, no problem. How many rounds is that from when I finished my toe? I'm going to count it, you guys. I'm going to count it. Let's say it's 65. Let's say it's 70. It doesn't really matter. But I want to know that when I knit the second sock, it's going to match perfectly. I'm not going to just rely on sliding it on here. I do recommend learning how to read your knitting. And at one point, I am going to demo these things in just a minute. I'm just talking through theory with you all right now. But I am going to physically demonstrate these things for you, picking up the stitches, etc. So that is why I think measuring is really important. Susan B. Anderson does her smooth operator sock, which is top down, and she also does her knitting my first toe up sock. These are both Craftsy classes. Craftsy has now been purchased, I think, or has changed its name to Blueprint. I don't really know the backstory behind that, but that's how you find. You can go to Craftsy or Blueprint and find Susan B. Anderson's classes. Highly recommend taking those. So many bits of information, how to measure, counting. There's a lot, and she gives you both options. So I do recommend going and taking a look at these videos. You do have to purchase the videos. Sometimes they're on sale, sometimes they're not. I understand that money is a factor for some people and you may not be able to do that. You can find free information online. Again, measuring and all of that, I do have links to that within the Ravelry group, so please go there and have a look. It's everything is clearly marked. Because again, I do want to respect the fact, and I just want to say this at least once, I do understand the economics behind knitting in general. Some people have the means to splurge on their yarn. Some people don't have the means to do that, and there are alternatives, less expensive alternatives, and I've talked about that within the Ravelry group. I've also talked about that on past episodes. So I do understand if purchasing a class, or do you want to purchase a class, or do you want to save that money and buy yarn, maybe buy a prettier yarn or something like that. So I absolutely understand there may be a trade-off. You may have to decide. There are free sources. They have been linked on the Ravelry group. So again, please go and have a look. And if there's something you're looking for and you don't see a link, in the Ravelry group, ask me here. Ask a question down below, and I will try to find it for you. I will even if it's a real need, I will even try my best to reach out to the instructor if that's possible, and see whether they will give me permission to go into greater detail here on the podcast or in this episode on this platform. I can't guarantee that, but it's nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I'm more than happy to explore that if it comes to that. That's not going to be a first choice. And I'm not putting that on the table really as a, sure, I can run ahead and do that. But again, if there's something you're looking for and we just can't find it for free, then I will see what can happen, how much information I will be given to present to you here. So we have covered measuring your foot. We've covered row and stitch gauge, counting versus measuring, customizing your foot, customizing your sock. If you, again, it goes back to everything we've just said. You are going to measure your foot. You're going to do a gauge. And you know what, you guys? Knit a little sock. These are great. And I did a knit along last December or last fall, the mini sock garland and you can see right behind me all of these socks back here. I decided to hang them and just sort of put them on display. There's some more of them here hanging up for you, just for me too, just to inspire me to finish, because I never finished my own calf. It's okay. I stopped beating myself up about it. But knit these. If you know, if there's a baby in your life, it's not a wasted effort. You can hang them later. You can use them as decoration at the holidays. You can use them to decorate your nook or your space. You can give them as little gifts at the holidays, whatever you want to. Save them for baby's feet. They don't have to match. Mismatched socks can be really, really fun, especially on a baby. So this is not going to be a wasted effort. And this pattern is by Legacy Fiber Arts. It is their mini sock pattern. There are links to that. I've linked to that in past episodes, but I will put it down here because I really think this is a great tool for a swatch. It's enough space to measure, to see what your row gauge is, to see what your stitch gauge is. You also have this big space in here. You can practice toes, you can practice heels, you can practice cuffs. It is a great little canvas if you don't want to take the time or don't have the time to knit a full sock as your swatch. You can do that, no problem. If it doesn't fit you, you can pass it on to someone else. But the tendency is to, if you're knitting a sock, you might want it for yourself, or you don't want to necessarily go, ugh, now what am I going to do with this? It's not the right size, it's too big, it's too small, it's too wide, it's too narrow. So you may want to save yourself the time it takes. And there was a question too about how long socks take to knit. Unfortunately, guys, I wish I had a magic wand. I really do, because I'm such a Harry Potter fan. I wish I had a magic wand where I could just go Accio finished sock and your socks would be done. It really is just, it takes time. If you're a fast knitter, great. If you are not, and your sock is just going to take a while, enjoy the process. There is no race. I've said this 100 times. There is absolutely no race. Take your time, enjoy the process, enjoy the stitches, look at it as a learning experience. Instagram and Ravelry and places like that, social media, can give you a sense of urgency or create a false sense that you have to hurry up and produce. You have to keep putting, and I fall victim to this all the time. Yes, I've got quite a few followers on Instagram. There's people with gajillions more than I do, but I do get a sense sometimes like, ooh, gosh, I haven't posted anything finished in a really long time, and I have to hurry, or I have to finish something. And you know what? Sometimes there are just days where I can't knit. I don't have the time. Try this. It's quick. It's easy. You can practice with different methods, DPNs, double point DPNs, magic loop, 2 circs, whatever you want. 9-inch needles as well. Well, a 9-inch, this is way too small for a 9-inch, but yeah, way too small. You have to you still have to, if you want to try the 9-inch method, you do have to do a full-size sock. There's just not enough stitches on here to go around a 9-inch needle. So yes, I think we have covered all of the practical things. Now it's time for me to demonstrate all of this for you. So I will be back in just a second. Hello everybody, I'm back. So I hope everyone can see. The light here, I'm back over by the window. The light is good enough for you to be able to see what I'm doing here. So what I have done, I have a sample here, right here. So what I've done just to prepare is I've already knit the gusset, knit the heel flap, and I have done the turn. So I am ready now to pick up these stitches right along here. Now as you can see, or maybe you can't see, I hope you can see, these stitches, let me use this, I have twisted these stitches right in here. These are twisted. You see how this leg, the front leg, is coming over the other leg? Now I'm also stretching this out so you can see it. There are technically no, these are not holes. I mean, there's going to be a space. No matter what you're doing with knitting garments, you're going to have a space, but it's not considered a hole. So what you're doing here is you twist these stitches to avoid holes. That is what you're doing, okay? That helps you to avoid the holes, knitting in and twisting the stitches. And then once you start picking these stitches up, this intersection in here is the potential holy spot. So I am going to now show you how to avoid all of that. So like I said, I worked on this earlier today, and I just did the heel flap here just in a slip stitch pattern, just so it's a little easier for you to see what I'm doing. So now I am ready to pick up these stitches right along here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And even though this is a slightly variegated yarn, I still think that you'll be able to see. Now, here's an interesting thing. There's a row of stitches here. There's a row of stitches right across here. And there's another row of stitches here. So, big question, which set of stitches are you going to pick up? You want to pick up the stitches on the far outer edge as you can. The further in you pick up those stitches, you're taking away from inches and space within the sock. You are making your sock a little smaller the further in you come. Okay, so yes, I could pick up stitches here, but then I'm losing 2 rounds, and that, or 2 sets of stitches, and that might not seem like a lot, but that can, you're decreasing, definitely decreasing the size of your sock. So what I'm going to do here is slide my needle into place. Actually, I'm gonna, oh, there goes my phone. I will be back in just 1 second, you guys. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. So here we go. I'm going to, now I've had this issue before with working with, oh, there I am. I've had this issue before when I'm doing a demonstration and I have to look through the camera as opposed to just looking at my hands, but I will do the best that I can. So what I have done here is I've gone into the stitch underneath. I've picked up both legs of the stitch. Oh, am I in the right place? Yes. I've picked up both legs of the stitch. Okay, I have to look at this for a second, guys. I had it just now, and now I've lost it. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to pick that up. Now I'm going to find the next one. And I'm going to pick that up. That's 2, 3, and I'm just going to do this all the way across. 4, 5, and I'm sorry if this is boring, you can skip ahead. Okay, almost there. So now let's go back and just count. I've done, that's 7, and here is 8. Now, there's a big gap in here, okay? So what I'm going to do is actually pick up another stitch, and again, this is where you do, it's an absolute is okay to ignore. There is no absolute. So if the pattern tells you to pick up 8 stitches, which we have done, here's 8 stitches on the needle, but you realize, my gosh, how am I gonna get over here with this big giant space in here? It's okay to pick up an extra one. Okay, so I'm gonna pick up 9. Now, here comes the fun part. Where am I going to pick up in this space that remains? So here is my stitch. What am I going to pick up in here to avoid a hole? If I go in here and just pick up, now if you also look, you've got the front leg of the stitch, or the left leg of the stitch, and the right leg of the stitch. If you just go into the left leg of the stitch, you're going to get a big hole. If you just go into the right leg of the stitch, same thing, a big hole. If I go in under that stitch, in here, that might not be too terrible. Let's pick it up and I'll show you what I mean. Because once you knit that and you go into here and you're going to twist it, it'll close. But you also, so that's an option. What I like to do, and I'm going to try very hard to keep this needle out of the way, is pick up, so you see here, I'm going to skip this stitch right in here. These two stitches, I'm going to pick up the left leg of this one and the right leg, yes, left leg of that one and the right leg of this one here. You see how if you look at them on the row together, if you hold this sock together, it's on the same row. They're on the same line, on the same row. So I'm picking up the left leg of this stitch and the right leg of this stitch. Now let me see if I can do that. You're going to pick those up together this way and knit them together. And you're going to, oh dear, hold on. This is so hard to do on camera. Okay, I'm going to go in here and pick this up like this, guys. So if you need to come through one and then kind of grab in here and come through the other, there you go. And now when you look at this, let's get this needle out of the way. There are no holes. I hope that that was clear. It is already twisted for you. And now I'm going to slide this needle in place and I'm going to continue knitting across. I'm going to undo that and do it again because I don't feel like that was clear enough because I'm trying to keep this other needle out of the way. So again, I'm going to go into this stitch normally as if to knit. I'm also going into this portion of the stitch below as if to knit. And you're going to, again, because now it's a little bit stretched because I've worked it already. So I'm going to go in, hold on, hold that up. I'm going to go in right there and I'm going to knit those two together. There we go. Okay, continues straight into this line. There is no hole. And now I'm going to knit across here and I'm going to come across. I'm going to split this up and I'm going to pick up the stitch on the other side. I will be right back. Okay, so now I have separated the instep stitches onto my other needle and I'm ready. I'm at the other intersection. Now if you look, here we go. I want to pick up these two stitches, this one and this one right here are on that same line that I'm interested in picking up. Okay, and then the gusset stitches are right along here. So what I want to do is in this case now you're going to do the opposite of what you did on the other side. On the other side you picked up the left leg of one stitch, the right leg of the other. You're doing the same thing here, but just kind of in another, well, not quite in the other direction. Same principle. So I'm picking up the right leg of that stitch and the left leg of this stitch. Okay, does that make sense, guys? So I'm picking up, holding on to here. You're going to go in and pick up this stitch and I'm going to pick up here. And again, knit these two together. So I'm going to come through one and because I'm again looking through the camera, I can hold on here. Let's do it this way. A little fiddly, but I'm going to show you, and I want to come through this stitch. There we go. And then I will show you. Now that stitch got stretched because of what I was doing, but there's no hole. Okay, guys? And now I'm going to pick up these heel flap stitches. So here is one. Where am I? Here's two. Okay, I really don't know how people do this. I think they might have a slightly different setup than me. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, oops, 7, 8. Now I picked up 9 on the other side and I picked up 8 on this side. Okay, now I realize that is going to be confusing to some of you. I can go back, let's undo it, because I want you to see. Hold on. Because I know if stitch counts are off. Now, I want this to be the same, but this side was presenting itself a little differently than the other side. So what I can do is go in here. There's my extra. And it's an even cleaner pickup. So that was my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and now this is going to be 9 because I picked up an extra one here at the intersection, and here is 9. Okay, now I'm ready to just continue going across the remaining heel stitches, which is 6 in this case. But again, the numbers right now don't matter that much. It's the technique that we're interested in. Okay, and now when I pull this out, here we go, you guys. There are no holes, as you can see. I'm going to just start knitting into these stitches. If you look at the other side, let's get this strand out of the way. Again, no holes, guys. Okay, and then once you continue, which is what you're going to be doing because we just picked up the stitches right along here, you're just going to knit into, and I'll show you really quickly. I've actually demoed this before in another video, but what you're going to do with your heel stitches, the 6, you're going to knit those regularly. So 3, 6, those are going to be knit regular. And when you get here, you're going to twist these stitches, okay? Which means you're going to knit into the back loop of those 9 stitches that you picked up, all right? Then when you get back, and you can put markers in all of these places. So put a marker here to mark off where your heel stitches are. Then you're going to put another marker here because this is where your gusset ends. And then here are your instep stitches. And then you can do the same thing on the other side, okay? That is basically it, you guys. So now let's measure. I wanted to show you measuring. Let me grab the tape measure right here. And I want to show you measuring. So if you, again, are going to measure this, I know that from the edge of my cuff to, actually, let's do it this way. That makes more sense. From the edge of my cuff to where the heel starts, which is right here, is about 1 inch and, say, 1/4. Okay, but what I can also do to guarantee that this sock is always, that all of my socks are going to be the same length, I know that I'm knitting 18 rounds on my cuff, or 12 rounds on my cuff, and then 12 rounds on the leg. And your stitches, what you're actually counting is each V. So if you come in here, you're going to count, here's 1. 1 second, my darling boy.
Can I have some jelly beans?
Yes, ask your sister. It's the day after Easter and he needs jelly beans. So what I'm going to do, here's my last purl stitch. So I'm going to come above and I'm going to just, this is what you're counting. This is the V. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and I'm almost in line to do my heel flap in here, to start my heel flap for my stitches. So that's 12 rounds. But this is what you're counting, and this is why progress keepers, you guys, are so important. If you have a progress keeper, here, I'm going to pull one off from here. If you have your progress keepers, I happen to have a little peep. Let's pull him off so I can show you. And this came from Sucra Miniatures, if anyone is interested. Here is my little peep. Isn't he cute? So what you do, so that you don't have to keep counting every time, is give yourself, create a system for yourself. So every 10 rounds, Okay, so every 10 V's, every 10 stitches, you can place a marker. So you can put multiple markers if you need them, and they can all be hanging, but be careful because the weight can start to distort. They're very light. I mean, I can barely feel this in my hand, but it will start to distort the stitches after a while. You can put little pins like these. If you don't want to use a full progress keeper, you can use these little light bulb foilless pins. You can use these every 10 stitches. You place one of these, and I did this when I was knitting my tundra sweater. I use these. So every 10 stitches, you're going to hook one of these in. So all you have to do then is count these. 1 second, my sweet boy. 1 second, darling. I'm almost finished. I'm almost done. You just count these, or you can go back and use these, and let's say every 25 stitches you move the progress keeper up. So 25, you move it up. Now you're at 50, now you're at 75, etc., etc. And that's basically it for counting, you guys. Here are your tools. This is what you do. Here is your picked up stitches with no holes, and I'm going to knit a little bit more of this and just show you a picture of this at the very end. Hello everyone, I am back. So we have discussed all of our topics for this particular episode. I have done the demo, which I hope you found helpful. I hope you found it clear enough to understand. If you did not, again, please let me know, and I will try to add some extra footage if necessary into the next video. And in our next episode, this was really fun for me to do. Hold on, I feel like my camera's a little off. This is really fun for me to do, and I really hope that you do find it helpful. I don't have the equipment, the time, or the space to do full, heavy-duty, full-length tutorials with multiple parts. It's just outside of what I can do right now. But again, that's why, and I also don't think it's necessary for me to do them in such great detail, because I can refer you to people, to the experts that have better equipment, that have better setups. I can refer you to other people that are demonstrating these things. One thing that I will caution you about, if you're watching a video, and I had this happen just recently, and I'm going to talk about this in Sock Talk episode 3 in more detail, but I'll say it again then. But I watched a video the other day to learn how to do a short row heel, and the video wasn't that clear. The person demonstrating it had the camera sort of at an angle looking at their hands this way, and they're knitting along, so the camera is over their shoulder, and they're knitting along, and then they kind of they showed you what stitches to pick up, and then they laid it down on a table, and they're admiring it, but they didn't zoom in on the heel specifically. They didn't turn it to so you could see one side, see the other side, and I knit the heel, and when I realized, if you were looking at my my Insta story, I realized the two sides didn't look the same, and that that drove me crazy. I mean, the perfectionist in me went a little berserk, and I do understand it. You're knitting the nature of the heel. You may not be able to get it absolutely perfectly identical matching, but you can get it a lot closer than it looked like two completely different heels in this one heel, and it drove me nuts. So my point is, if you're looking at a video, if you're watching a video and it's not crystal clear to you, or you say to yourself, oh, I wish the camera angle were a little bit better, or I can't see that quite right, try to find another video. When you Google short row heels on YouTube, this many videos pop up, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Is it time consuming to watch them all? Yes. Watch the first maybe 3 or 4 and see, because I think YouTube ranks them in terms of popularity, and how many times they have been Googled, how many times they've been watched, etc. So you definitely want to watch a few of the first few that are listed and see if the camera angles are a little bit better. These are all tiny little tips and tricks that will help you. You don't have to watch just one. And if this video doesn't work for you, there may be something that I did that I wasn't clear, or my fingers got in the way, or the cable from the needle got in the way, ask me to show it again. I will try my best to show it again, or you can go try to find it in another video. Another video may have it a little bit clearer. I have done my best here. And again, I hope that you do find this video helpful for you. And again, this is part 1 of our Sock Talk series. It's going to be 3 parts. So, yes, I think that covers everything for today. So the next episode, and I'm going to try to record these one right after the other just to get them all out for you. The next episode is going to be part 2, and that's going to be focusing on the afterthought heel. I currently have 2 pairs of socks that I'm knitting top down and toe up, or cuff down and toe up, and I'm putting afterthought heels in both of them. So I'm curious. I haven't done a toe up sock in ages and ages and ages, and I've never done an afterthought heel in a toe up sock. I realize I'm talking too much and my mouth is getting sore, so I'm going to wrap this up in just a moment. So how do you avoid holes? How do you avoid ladders? That was another big thing, and it's something that just in the last, I think I was unconsciously doing it because I don't usually get ladders in my socks, but I now realize what exactly it is that I've been doing, so I can tell you what I've been doing to avoid heels. And this applies, again, to any technique that you're using, whether it's DPNs, magic loop, 2 circulars. The only one it wouldn't apply to as much is the 9-inch needles. But yes, so next episode we are covering afterthought heel, toe up, top down, where do you place your heel, and again, the big question, how do you avoid the holes? Again, I hope everybody has found this helpful. Thank you so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode of Sock Talk. Bye, everybody.